Good morning. I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to the inaugural Tech for Good Summit for Scotland, today, the 20th of April, 2021. The date is very significant for us because on the 20th of April 2020, we launched the Scottish Tech Army. We're delighted to be able to bring this event to you today with our partners Code Clan, Scotland Is, and Oscar, the Scottish Charity Regulator. I'd like to take you back to the beginning of last year and the events that took place in the first quarter that have made such a difference to everything that we've experienced over the last year. The end of January was when the first COVID case was confirmed in the UK. And as we all now know, things developed very rapidly from that point onwards to the point where the UK had to enter a national lockdown to prevent the continued acceleration of the spread of the virus. It was early April 2020 that we first conceived of the idea of launching the Scottish Tech Army. The UK was in the first national lockdown. The furlough scheme had been announced but not yet implemented, and it was clear that many organisations that were on the front line of dealing with the effects of the pandemic were being put under massive strain. The concept for the Scottish Tech Army was that we would recruit volunteers from the tech sector in Scotland to put their skills to work to help to provide digital solutions to those organisations to help them cope with the demand that they were facing and the challenges of the circumstances under which they had to operate. All of that culminated in the launch of the Scottish Tech Army on the 28th of April. We set out with a clear set of initial objectives. Our mission was to mobilise the Scottish tech community to bring them and their skills to bear on the challenges of the organisations that were in the front lines, helping to develop solutions rapidly using technology to help them deliver their mission. Clearly, the first objective was to provide a delivery capability for those organisations with those needs, which they didn't themselves have and they had no way of being able to access. Secondly, our intent was to generate public good through the delivery of these projects and by helping those organisations to continue to be effective and to cope with the demand that they were facing. Thirdly, and also very importantly, we wanted to offer a sense of purpose and achievement for the volunteers who signed up to the Scottish Tech Army. In the lead up to our launch, we talked with a number of organisations, all of whom were very supportive and very keen to play their part in helping us to get this initiative off the ground. Our earliest conversations were with the Digital Director at the Scottish Government, including CivTech, who were extremely supportive and were seeing at first hand the challenges that were being faced in the public and the third sectors in particular. We then reached out to existing contacts that we had, including Hot Tin Roof, PR agency, and Powers Design, both of whom turned around press materials and brand and design materials for us literally overnight from the first point at which we contacted them. MEM Commercial, the legal firm, helped us with the establishment of the Scottish Tech Army and making sure that everything was in place to enable us to launch on the 28th of April. We knew from the outset that matching volunteers to projects was going to be a challenging process if we were successful on anything like the scale that we had hoped. On that basis, we contacted Head Resourcing, Edinburgh-based recruitment firm, to seek their support, and they stepped up immediately as well, providing a number of their consultants as volunteers to help us with that matching process. Finally, Amicus, another Edinburgh-based tech company, have given us access to their platform to be able to carry out identity checks to make sure that we're carrying out these projects in a safe and secure way. So, as many of you will have experienced, when launching a new venture, it's very hard to be able to gauge what the response is going to be. We were absolutely delighted at the level of response that we got when we launched the Tech Army. Within the first day, we had 150 volunteers signed up. Within the first month, 700. And by that point, we had 30 organisations that had come forward to ask for our support. That really did get us off to a flying start and gave us the conviction and the confidence that we were going to be able to play a part in helping to deal with the pandemic. Over the course of the period that we've been in operation, we've worked with a great many organisations across Scotland, in most cases delivering very local impact, but giving us national coverage. One of the things that struck us from the outset was the breadth and the diversity of the volunteers who stepped forward to support the initiative. Of course, all of this had to be done remotely, and we had to use remote collaboration tools and techniques to be able to work with organisations the length and breadth of Scotland. But that was the challenge that we were able to meet using those technologies, and as a result, able to deliver those projects to those organisations, meeting our initial objective of being able to deliver support in days to weeks, not months to years, because that was the time frame on which these organisations really needed help and to be able to scale their activities. I'm going to pick up some highlights from the work that we've done and we helped support over the course of the last year. And without much apology, I'm going to pick as the first example one that was carried out internally within the Scottish Tech Army. This dates back to quite early on in our operations. We had been in discussion with the Scottish Government in terms of the data that was being made available on incidence rates, fatality numbers, and so on in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. At the time, the information was being shared, but only in the form of spreadsheets that were being published online. And so we set our volunteers the task of trying to come up with a more interactive, more graphical, and more easily accessible visualization of the data. And the teams really rose to this challenge. 4 teams self-organized to create initial prototypes for the solution. And at the end of that 2-week period, presented the solutions to the community as a whole. And then in the following 2 weeks, combined to take the best ideas from each of those teams to create one composite result, which is what you see on the screen now and is still available at the URL that you can see on the screen. This was designed to give much easier access to and understanding of the statistics for citizens all across Scotland, including the use of a technique called sonification, which is a mechanism to allow people who have got visual impairment to be able to understand quantitative data using audio tones to be able to communicate the information. This has been something that was launched in September 2020, and that same team has continued to be very active in developing the dashboard going forwards. But of course, there are many, many projects that we worked on and that we've seen which have come from organizations out with the Tech Army. So again, I'd like to pick on a few of these. One of the areas that came across very strongly to us was that of digital inclusion, or indeed digital exclusion in the first case. We've seen a number of projects that have worked on this to great effect, and I'll just pick out a few of them here. First of them is an organization called Thriving Survivors, and we have the CEO of that organization on one of our panels today. That group created a digital inclusion pack, provided peer support and mentoring for trauma-affected individuals across Scotland, giving them a way to be able to connect with and communicate with others who were going through the same sort of challenges that they had, and do so while they were having to remain under lockdown conditions and potentially facing a great deal of isolation. We worked with the Government Community Project, which had a digital access project for asylum seekers and refugees, again, to enable them to maintain contact with a very vulnerable group of people and to be able to help and support them through the crisis. One of the very earliest projects that we worked on was with an organization called Gregarious Chinwag, which we provided digital tools to help this local community group combating isolation and loneliness. And one of the biggest projects in this space, which is an initiative of the Scottish Government, is the Connecting Scotland programme. Already £50 million of investment has been committed by Scottish Government to address the challenges faced by what's estimated to be 800,000 citizens in Scotland who are digitally excluded. So a huge amount of investment going into that project. The next area I'd like to pick up on is education and training. We've had a lot of requests for support to deliver information online in the form of training, educational materials, and other access to information to help people to adapt and respond to what was happening all around them. First of these was with Young Enterprise Scotland, a project that we worked on with them to accelerate their transition from a largely offline provision to much more online provision. bringing forward plans that they had been developing for some time to help those in primary, secondary, and tertiary education develop entrepreneurial skills. We also worked with an organization called LilyPads, which we helped to provide an online education portal for period products. And they're working in Scotland and internationally in Africa using these online tools that they've put together with our help. Another of our partners, Code Clan, had to transition to fully online delivery of its digital skills training as they continue on their mission to foster the next generation of tech talent in Scotland. And they've been operating fully remotely for a number of months now. We've had a very productive partnership with Glasgow Caledonian University. And again, you'll be hearing from a representative of the university in some of the sessions today. They responded very quickly to secure funding to be able to offer upskilling courses in software development and data science, which they made available to a much wider range of applicants than had traditionally been the case, including many of the volunteers who are in the Scottish Tech Army, who have taken advantage of this program to be able to continue their skills development during the restricted times that we've been living under. And the final one here is an initiative that's just being started by University of Glasgow to develop a course for digitizing the third sector to be delivered to leaders in the sector to help them to understand and capitalize on the awareness that's been raised of the potential for the use of digital technologies over the course of the last year. Of course, there are many of the organizations that we've worked with who were operating in the digital and health and social care space. One of the very early ones that we worked with was Voluntary Service Aberdeen, helping them to put in place an inventory management system for personal protective equipment to make sure that their staff and those they were caring for could interact safely and make sure they were able to deliver the continuing service that their community of service users required. We also worked with Edinburgh Community Food to help them to develop some online cookery demonstrations and to be able to help to educate and provide healthy food for citizens across Edinburgh. We've worked with the Trussell Trust, which is an organisation that supports food banks across the whole of the UK, and been working with them in Scotland particularly to help them to implement a system to manage the availability and the scheduling of the volunteers who commit their time to work in the food banks that the Trussell Trust supports. We worked with an organisation called Crossreach, a counselling service, to help them to deliver online access to some of the services that they provide. Again, this is something that they had been envisaging for some time, but the urgency of the situation that they were now facing meant that a rapid solution was really what was required and what was going to be able to help them to respond in the way that they wanted to. The final one in this section is a project which is called Miracle, which was designed to collate and make available information on local mental health services for young people across the country. Finally, I'm going to talk about, in terms of some of the work that's been done so far, is in the area of local economic recovery. Clearly, many local businesses have suffered very severely under the constraints that they've had to operate under for the last year. We had many requests for communities across Scotland asking, could we help to enable those organisations to trade online and to be able to have local citizens supporting local business. That's a project that we've been working on for more than 6 months now with a technology partner of ours run by one of our volunteers. And we were able to complete the launch of that as a pilot in Dunbar in East Lothian, which went live on Monday of this week with the support of East Lothian Council. And it's designed as a single online community portal that can be used by the individuals, the organizations, and the businesses in these communities to be able to engage, to interact, and transact with each other all in one place, enabling all of these organizations and businesses to get online on the same platform in a consistent way, making it much more accessible and easy to use for the citizens in those communities. All this work has come together in the form of the impact that we've been able to make so far. And in order to be able to quantify that, we have carried out social impact analysis with the support of the University of Glasgow. There were 4 categories of value that were considered in the analysis. The first of those was the value of the time offered by the volunteers. The second was the incremental benefit to the organizations that were being supported through the solutions that were delivered to them. The third area is the value of the management team contribution from within the Scottish Tech Army. And finally, the fourth category is the incremental skills gained by the volunteers in the Scottish Tech Army through schemes that we've put in place for mentoring, peer support, and ongoing learning and knowledge sharing amongst the community. Of course, it may be the case that some of this would have happened without the Scottish Tech Army having been in place. And so we've discounted the impact calculations to take account of that. And you can see that the estimate that we have of the social impact delivered up to the period of January of this year was around £616,000, which is equivalent to approximately £925,000 of value delivered if you annualize that figure. All of that's been done on very modest expenditure. We have been fortunate to benefit from support from Scottish Government and from the National Lottery Community Fund. But the return on investment from the work that has been done has been in excess of tenfold compared to the costs that have been incurred in doing so. So if we look back over the course of the last year, what are some of the key observations that we have made in the course of carrying out the work that we've done? The first of these is something that will be no surprise to those who work in the sector, but the utilisation of digital technologies in the third sector is very low. Historically, that's been a combination of factors that have led to that. There's been limited awareness of the potential of technology and potentially limited experience within the organisation of how to put those technologies to work. In many cases, they're working on very limited budgets and quite understandably are prioritising the use of those funds for the delivery of frontline services. And we've also observed that over the course of the year that we've been in operation, there is a lot of commonality that organisations have in terms of what their requirements are, but there's actually very little sharing and reuse of solutions. Of course, it's not a case that one size fits all, but it's very much the case that there are common threads that we believe can be consolidated in order to be able to deliver more scalable solutions. The second observation is that the pipeline for talent development and career development in Scotland has been significantly impacted by the pandemic. The employment situation has been much tougher for many people, especially those in the early stages of their career. And so a lot of the work that we've done has been intended to help support those people who are at that stage of their career, to help them to gain experience in putting their skills to work, to be able to work with more experienced people and start building a network in the tech community. The third observation is related to what I was talking about with local economies, that many of the key sectors in the Scottish economy have been significantly impacted by the pandemic. And recovery from that is something that's going to take some considerable time and will require both investment and also implementations of new technologies to be able to address those challenges. So as a result of that, the Scottish Tech Army has transitioned from what was very much a crisis response initiative into an enduring organisation with a much broader tech for good ambition and mission. We aim to be a catalyst which will contribute towards making a step change in the impact and effectiveness of the application of technology for good in Scotland. Of course, this is something that is very much something we want to do in partnership with many other organisations, many of whom you'll be hearing from today in terms of the work that they do and how collectively we can make more impact by working together to create solutions and to be able to deliver them to as wide a community and an audience as possible. So if we look around at the Tech for Good ecosystem, our ambition is to play a part in drawing together as much of this activity as possible, to share information, to make people aware of what's happening in the sector across all of these different constituencies, all of which we've worked with over the course of the last year, and have developed some very strong partnerships already that we're keen to extend and develop. So clearly at the heart of much of this is the volunteer community that we've created. 1,500 volunteers have signed up and have become part of the Tech Army community. There are many business support provider organizations that we have interacted with who provide vital support to us and to others in the sector. Scottish Government, as I mentioned, is a key player in the space, obviously, both in terms of understanding and organising response and as a critical funder to many organisations in the third sector, as well as funding the public sector itself. Fourth one is the further and higher education sector and organisations like CodeClan, the Digital Skills Academy, who have a key part to play in developing the next generation of the talent for the Scottish tech industry. The tech industry itself is clearly a key player, and many organisations have programs in place. And this is something that we think there's a real opportunity to build on and to be able to continue to develop over the years to come. Third sector organisations, clearly one of the key organisational groups that we've worked with in terms of those who can benefit from these services and initiatives. And finally, corporate supporters and sponsors who have their own initiatives in place to be able to support social good initiatives of one sort or another. And we aim to work with them as closely as possible to apply that to the Tech for Good ecosystem. So coming on to what you're going to be experiencing today, we're absolutely delighted by the breadth and the depth of talent and experience that we've been able to pull together to take part in today's event. So the first of those I'd like to highlight are our keynote presenters. So we have two, one at the start of today and one at the end. First being Sinead McPherson, who is the chair of the Robertson Trust. The Robertson Trust is one of the major charitable funding organisations in Scotland, has engagement with literally hundreds of third sector organisations across the country. And Sinead will be giving us the perspective from the funders of the importance of digital technologies and the Tech for Good ecosystem. At the end of today, we will be joined by Amanda Renteria, who is the Chief Executive of Code for America, an organization which has been in operation for over 10 years now in the States, delivering Tech for Good projects, many in the area of access to government services. So we'll both get an international perspective and an understanding of some of the government services initiatives that have been taking place in the States. We then have our plenary panel looking at the status and opportunities for the Tech for Good ecosystem, and that's being chaired by Peter Proud, who is the founder and CEO of Forit, one of Scotland's leading technology companies, and particularly active in the space of talent development as part of their talent attraction and development program. We'll then have the initiation of what we called our Volunteers Assemble Challenge. This is a selection of 6 projects which we have been asked to carry out. And we've got teams from all across the tech industry who are going to be spending 2.5 hours looking at how they could design a solution to help deliver the solution to the request that has been submitted. And they'll be coming back later in the day to present the solutions back to the audience as a whole to get feedback and for us to vote on the top 3. We then have 3 avenues of exploration, as we're calling them. First of those is titled The Art of the Possible. We then have one which is about the Tech for Good ecosystem, and we have one about agents of change, the volunteers who have been part of this. Again, delighted to have a particularly high caliber group of panel chairs and moderators. So those discussions, we have Jane Morrison-Ross, who is the Chief Executive of South West Scotland Enterprise, Gillian Doherty, who is Chief Executive of the Data Lab, Fiona Stewart-Knight, who is Assistant Vice Principal at Glasgow Caledonian University. We have Graham Johnson, who has been a volunteer with the Scottish Tech Army and is now a senior director with ASDA. Joanna Allen, who is the head of projects and programme at the Scottish Tech Army, and Mark Kailman, who is the head of products and services in the Scottish Tech Army. We then have the launch of our Tech for Good Ambassadors programme. So I'm afraid there's no spoiler alerts on this one. You're going to have to wait till that part of the day to find out who we are bringing on board as our ambassadors. But I'm extremely excited to be able to introduce this group of people to you who we think are really key influencers in the sectors in which they operate. We then have the feedback from the Volunteers Assemble Challenge session, in which the teams will be pitching to the audience as a whole their ideas for solutions to the challenges that have been set. We'll then be asking you, the audience, to vote for what you think are the 3 most effective solutions in terms of their impact, their achievability, and their effectiveness. Finally, at the close of the session today, we'll be talking about what we're going to do going forwards. This is something which we hope is going to be a great event. We're really looking forward to input from as many of you as possible, but we see this very much as a launch pad for something that is going to follow and how we're going to develop the Tech for Good ecosystem. We talked about wanting to catalyze a step change in the impact in the Tech for Good ecosystem. And for us, this really is the starting point for that. Each of the sessions that we have today, we'll be looking to identify what are the specific actions that we can take to advance our shared mission in terms of Tech for Good in Scotland and how we can make this as effective as we possibly can. I'd like to make a point of thanking our sponsors and contributors for today. Head Resourcing, who, as I mentioned, have been a long-term partner of ours since the beginning of the Tech Army's operations, who have stepped up as a sponsor and are helping us with more support on the day. We have ACE IT, run by one of the volunteers in the Tech Army who has been extremely active in supporting many of the projects that we've been delivering. We have support from ASDA with its focus on community involvement. Aginor Technology, which has been an exceptionally strong supporter of the work of the Scottish Tech Army through involvement of its staff as volunteers with us, but also helping us in terms of giving access to the skills and opportunities that they have for their staff. User Testing has also been a long-term supporter of the Tech Army, giving us access to their platform to carry out testing of the application solutions that we've been developing, and they are joining us as a sponsor today. The Open University in Scotland is a new partnership for us, and also delighted to have them on board with us as sponsors today. Finally, we have Digit, which is our media partner for the day. Digit has been helping in the promotion of the event and are working to report on the event today. So that brings us to the end of this initial session. Delighted to have so many people joining us today. I'm going to hand back to our Master of Ceremonies for the day now, Richard Dean, who is going to take you into the first of our sessions for today. Thank you very much.